It's May 18th, 1980, 8:32 a.m. I'm standing on a beach on Ocean Shores, Washington, about 110 miles northwest of Mt St Helens. The clams have vanished. Yesterday, there were millions of clams. So many, I caught my limit in less than an hour. This morning, barely a clam to be found. I'm clamming with my Uncle Ted, and he's mystified. A lifetime of clam digging, and he's never seen anything like this. We've been out here for almost 2 hours, and the tide is coming in. What was that sound? It sounds like thunder, but the sky is clear. Maybe it's dynamite. Someone clearing stumps off their property. That's a strange thing to do on a Sunday morning. I give up. Time to go back to camp and have breakfast. Maybe tomorrow will be better. It was hours later that I found out what had caused the booming noises I heard, and probably caused the clams to disappear. Mt St Helens had blown her top. Everyone has a where were you when moment, some unforgettable event in time that lives forever in your memory, like it had just happened. St. Helens was one of those moments for me. My name is Gail Hyland, and I was 25 years old when these events took place. You can see from the slide that Mount St. Helens was a beautiful mountain, often compared to Japan's Mount Fuji. Spirit Lake was at the foot of the north side and surrounded by summer homes. This is how it looked after the eruption. So how did this happen? As you can see, there are a lot of volcanoes in the west. St. Helens is just one of many. It's located about 100 miles south of Seattle. Mount Rainier is even closer, less than 60 miles away. These mountains are in the Cascade Mountain Range and make up part of the Cascade Volcanic Arc. Geologists think that volcanoes are formed by the action of plate tectonics. In the Northwest, this occurs at the Cascadian subduction zone, which separates the Juan de Fuca plate from the North American plate. The Juan de Fuca plate is sliding east under the North American plate. This allows magma to come to the surface. Most volcanoes look like this one, shaped like a cone with a crater at the top. When an eruption occurs, it goes straight up. This was what most people were thinking of when St. Helens woke up in the spring of 1980. The newspapers and TV stations reported almost every day about the swarms of small earthquakes, the growing bulge on the north side of the mountain, and speculating about the possibility of rivers of lava and other pyrotechnics. What they couldn't see, of course, was the huge magma chamber that was forming underneath the bulge. At 8:32 Sunday morning, while I was standing in the surf, wondering where all the clams had gone, an earthquake caused the largest debris avalanche in recorded history as the north face of the mountain slid away and the magma chamber underneath it blasted through to the surface, exploding out sideways, not straight up. It's kind of like shaking up a bottle of pop and unscrewing the cap and pointing it at your brother. The landslide hit Spirit Lake like an elephant jumping into a kiddie pool. All the water was displaced, and it turned into a giant wave almost 600 feet high, mixed up with trees and stumps and mud. The blast caused a pyroclastic flow of very hot volcanic gases, ash, and pumice to shoot northwards from the mountain almost 20 miles. It was so hot that it sheared off the trees right at the stump, leaving them all on the ground pointing in the same direction. In this slide, if you look down in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see two men. Gives you an idea of the scale of the destruction. In some places, it even destroyed the topsoil. President Jimmy Carter flew over the area and said, "The moon looks like a golf course compared to what's up there." As the avalanche and the initial pyroclastic flow were still moving, a huge ash column grew to a height of 12 miles above the mountain in less than 10 minutes and spread ash into the atmosphere for 10 straight hours. By this time, I was on my way back to Seattle. The freeway was closed south of Olympia because visibility was so bad, and it was easy to see why. I'll never forget the enormous anvil-shaped black ash cloud to the south. The wind was carrying the ash eastwards, and towns like Yakima were so dark by noon that the streetlights came on. In some places, the ash was a foot deep, just like a winter snowstorm in May. And the ash wasn't like ash from a wood fire. It didn't smell good and remind you of camping and s'mores. Volcanic ash is actually made up of bits of rocks, minerals, and volcanic glass. When it gets wet, it's really heavy and hard to shovel. If it builds up on electrical transformers, it causes short circuits, leading to power outages. If it gets inside your car engine, it gums up the air filter and damages the car. The police had special air filters retrofitted onto their police cars. Most people just stayed home. 10 years later, piles of ash could still be seen along the roads in eastern Washington. In the meantime, the volcanic mud flow, called a lahar, raced down the mountain into the north and south forks of the Toutle Rivers. A 12-foot high wall of water and debris flowed downstream, knocking out bridges as it went. Eventually, it reached the Columbia River, increasing its depth or decreasing its depth from 39 feet to less than 13 feet in places, disrupting the river traffic and choking off ocean shipping. 40 years ago today, a very unusual event happened practically in my backyard. What do you think you might remember in 40 years?